Hi, my name is Pablo Jungent, and here I will present to you some information regarding Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and a fragment of his speech, I Have a Dream. Martin Luther King Jr. was the leader of the civil rights movement in the United States during the 1950s and the 1960s. Dr. King's written works reflect his heritage in the traditions of Southern Black Church, as well as his knowledge of Western philosophy. Moreover, his nonviolent approach to social reform and political activism, characterized by mass marches and large gatherings, was designed to demonstrate both the widespread acceptance of the tenets of civil rights and the barbarism of those who opposed to them. King's letter from Birmingham City Jail and the 1963 speech in which he declared, "I have a dream," are considered the written landmarks of the movement. Today, they are counted among history's greatest statements of human rights. In his speech, I Have a Dream, King paints a vision of a promised land, of justice and racial equality. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce you to this fragment of Mr. King's speech, I Have a Dream. Thank you for your attention. I Have a Dream, delivered by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on August 28, 1963. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of the nation. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand here today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light and hope to millions of Negro slaves who have been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as the joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacle of segregation and the change of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty, in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corner of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to the Capitol to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to follow. This note was a promise that all men, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America that the fierce urgency is now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drugs of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Thank you.